Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 9.3 mid-tier list. I do have a patch notes video out in depth about a lot of the changes, including a very detailed breakdown of all of the AD carry changes in terms of the items, how I think the meta will shift, and how that impacts a bunch of different other lanes as well. So be sure to check that out. Got a lot of explanations in there that other tier lists may not have, or other patch notes as well may not have. Excuse me, and I've also done the support tier list and the AD carry tier list as well, all with great in-depth explanations, so be sure to check that out. Like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Come by, check out the stream sometime. It starts most nights around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We also have coaching sessions on the channel, topical guides, individual champion playlists, all sorts of content, so check all that out, The Strategy Professor on YouTube. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. And I'll put a link in this Google Doc, which you can find in the description. I'll put some links to the patch notes and to the tier list as well, and I'll also have a link in the description to those videos. So check all that out, and I'll have timestamps in the description as well as in the first comment on the video. And for each one of these champions I'm going to go over, if you just click on it, I have a little mini guide where it'll send you to a link to the wiki, which will tell you more about the abilities and some of the specific numbers surrounding the champion. I have a rating system 1 to 5, 1 being the champion is one of the worst at the position at whatever that goal is, 5, one of the champion is one of the best at that position at that goal. So lane pressure is just how likely is the champion able to get priority, able to push in, harass, rotate. Kill threat is how likely is the champion able to get kills in the laning phase. Safety is how safe is the champion, particularly from ganks during the laning phase. Scaling is how well does the champion perform over time. And reliability is how likely is it that someone can perform at a high level on this champion over time. So part of that is how difficult is the champion to play in terms of mechanics, in terms of the decisions you have to make, but also how well does the champion fit into the meta. How well do they perform in a variety of different compositions that might be both on your team and on the enemy team. I also have recommended runes and recommended items. So all of that, once again, is in a little mini doc in this larger Google Doc that you can find in the description. Just, go right through, click on whatever's most interesting to you. I see I forgot to put the link to the Google Doc for these on there, but I'll put them in post-production. It'll be fine. We can just talk about them. Okay. Let's go ahead and get in here. All right, so number one, I still think it's going to be Malzahar. Malzahar has been a rising star lately. I've been a huge fan of him on the channel myself because he's so consistent. And he has so much utility and different things he can do. But it's not just me. A lot of people are starting to figure this out. Even on win rates at sort of platinum level here, he's one of the highest win rate mid laners at 52.7 with a respectable 6% pick rate. So 5th highest win rate and one of the highest pick rates, probably a top 10 highest pick rate. So statistically, he's pretty solid too. But I think even if we start breaking down and looking at some of his numbers, looking at some of his stats, you can start to see why he's really strong. And if you've watched the channel at all, me playing Midnight or on viewers' nights and things like that, I've been practicing a lot of Malzahar. He's sort of my go-to guy. Number one, he's very easy to play compared to a lot of the other mid laners out there, right? So that means that he's going to be more consistent. So especially if you're a support and you're getting auto-filled as mid lane or that's your secondary role or whatever, he's going to be very, very strong. And the fact that you don't have to worry about hitting a ton of skill shots and, all of that kind of stuff allows you to focus more on your macro game. You can track the jungler better to help your support out. You can shot call better. It just really lets you put a lot more of your sort of brain capacity into other aspects of the game because you're not sitting there focusing on highly mechanical, like technical interactions in the laning phase. So I think that's one thing that's just sort of intangible that's really good with him. Number two is he has lockdown CC that really cannot be undone unless they have a Quicksilver Sash or unless they CC you in return to knock you out of it. So that's exceptionally good for ganks, both if you gank, if you roam down and make a gank in one of the side lanes, and also if the jungler comes and ganks your lane, it's just almost always going to be a kill, right? If your jungler has any sort of damage whatsoever, if you flash forward, EWR them, they're going to be gone. You're probably going to do, even off of just one item, you might be able to fully kill them by yourself with one item, but you're definitely going to take them under 20% health, and the jungler should be able to finish them off. So it's very, very helpful. Great utility. Gives him some great game against other assassins out there. To some extent, if they don't blow him up immediately, he's going to have a huge trade back on him. So that's something that's always been part of Malzahar. It's still going to make him strong. And part of this is percentage health damage too. So that can be really good even against tanks. So even if you have to ult the Sejuani that's trying to dive your AD carry, it can still be useful. You're not going to kill her by yourself, but you're going to hold her still so the AD carry can beat on her, and you do percentage damage health on your ult, and he'll typically get a Liandry's at some point in his build as well, which will add on even more percentage-based damage. Other things that make him really strong is early on, he has tremendously strong push at a pretty reasonable mana cost. So, like, if you put the Malefic Visions and you prep the minions properly, remember that this jumps around every time that a minion dies, it'll jump to somebody else. So if it keeps jumping to different minions, you actually end up replenishing quite a bit of mana, because it replenishes 2% of your maximum mana. So if you have, like, 1,000 mana, for example, and you're casting this, you know, at rank 3 for 80, then you're going to be getting back 20 mana every time it jumps, right? So if it jumps to like 4 different people, you're getting a full refund on that ability. So it makes him very cost efficient early on, and usually with Luden's Echo, you can just run around and just kind of spam your Malefic Visions and your Void Swarm and just pretty much clean up the whole map. Not only your one lane, but you can do this to Raptors. He takes Raptors extremely easy without taking hardly any damage off of it. So if you push in and you don't see a good roam opportunity bot lane, you can go over, steal the enemy Raptors. If your jungler's just not clearing parts of their jungle, if they're just not clearing the wolves or clearing the Raptors, they're just spending their whole time ganking, or maybe they're invading and taking a bunch of the enemy jungle, but they're not clearing their own jungle, you can just go there and clear some of that out too. You can go get the Scuttle by yourself really easily. He's just one of the best, most mana efficient, sort of health efficient farmers in the game. So it's a really powerful interaction, and it's very hard for someone to stop you from doing this. If you just put the Malefic Visions up and drop your Void Swarm, it's hard for them to come in and trade on you, because if they do, the Malefic Visions might jump onto them, and that's going to cause the Void Swarm to go onto them as well. So a lot of people actually back off of the minion wave whenever you do this and push them in. So it's very easy to get priority, does a ton of damage to the minion wave, gives you a ton of healing, actually. I'm pretty sure this counts as single target. I couldn't find a direct answer on this, but I'm pretty sure this counts as single target healing for Ravenous Hunter. And so when this, like, you know, keeps churning through, keeps dealing damage, I don't know if it says down here or not. It seems to me like it would be considered single target, and as far as like Ravenous Hunter goes, but I'm not sure if the Void Swarm is considered single target or not, but either way, it gives you a ton of healing off of Ravenous Swarm. So if you do take a couple of hits in the laning phase, you can heal up a ton off of the minion wave just off of Malefic Visions, your Void Swarm, and Ravenous Hunter. And then even his Call of the Void, once you get your Ludens, you can use that to wave clear even faster. So he basically has like 3 AoE abilities that he can just crank out to wave clear. So he pushes super hard, takes the you know, can take the jungle really hard. So this gives you so many options. You can roam bottom, you can roam top, you can go get some deep vision while the enemy's pushed in. You can take their Raptors, you can take Scuttle, you can take dragons really quickly. You know, once you get Liandry's, every time this Void Swarm or Malefic Visions is beating on the dragon, that's adding extra ticks of that maximum health damage for the Liandry's. So takes dragons quickly, actually adds on quite a bit of extra damage to towers as well, because this Void Swarm can actually attack towers. So things like Zyra's plants can't attack towers, but the Void Swarm does attack towers. So, you know, if you push them in, or if, you know, their Fizz or their Kassadin or Leblanc decides to roam bottom, you push in with like a cannon wave or something that's there, you drop this Void Swarm, then those Void things are going to stay up and they're going to be beating on that tower, and it adds a lot of extra damage. So it actually does quite a bit of damage to towers. It also soaks tower shots. So if you trigger that Void Swarm out, you're spawning 3 Voidlings. That's going to take 3 tower shots, which means the minions are going to get to survive longer, which means you and your allies get to beat on towers even longer. So he's very, very good for a mage at taking towers. Not like Ziggs level or TF level at taking towers, but he's pretty dang good at it considering everything else that he has going on in his kit. So just really, really good, really versatile. You can even drop these Void Swarms whenever you get Rylai's. You can drop them to help kite. So just drop some Void Swarm. As you're running away, they'll walk over and attack anyone that's getting close to you, slow them down, boom, you get away. Or slow enemies down, boom, you get away. Even if you can try to save allies with this, you know, just drop that Void Swarm, Call of the Void, hit them, slow them down, the Void Swarm will come over and tag them. And then you're taking very little risk with that, that you're going to get caught out, but you still could potentially save your allies with that. So it has a lot of potential. You can even soak skill shots with this, right? If Blitzcrank's trying to come up and hook you, you drop this Void Swarm, keep the swarm between you and that hook. Then it's going to hit the minion instead. It can soak up like Zoe Bubbles, Blitz Hook, Thresh Hook, any type of skill shot, right, that can be blocked by minions can be blocked by Void Swarm. So that's another sort of high-level thing you can do with it. And he scales pretty well in terms of overall damage. You know, Malefic Visions has a 0.8 ratio on it, And don't forget, you can reset this on single targets too. So if you put this on somebody, get 3 seconds on them, and then Q them, it'll actually reset it. So then it's not only dealing, 220 damage, but you're getting most of a reset. If you do it absolutely perfectly, you can get 8 seconds out of it. But even at 7 seconds, it's still going to give you somewhere around like 140, 150% AP ratio, and probably somewhere in the neighborhood of like 400 damage, which is very, very good, obviously. And his Q has a ton of range, too. 900 range on this thing. You can even poke with this late game, right? It's got 210 base with 65. If you've watched any of my games, once you start getting like 4 or 5 items, which you can do very quickly on Malzahar, because you just absolutely crank out those crank out the CS, then you can very easily do a ton of damage with this. I mean, if we just look at sort of my recent record, we did lose a lot. Last night we did some viewers' night stuff, but if you just look at just how well you can farm with this dude, it's just ridiculous. Now, these were like normal games, right? And so when you're playing against people that are your peers that are stronger than you are, or as strong as you are, or whatever, you can see. But if we start breaking down and just looking at the minions in some of these games, some of the CS here, right? Like, all right, here we go. Like, I'm cranking in at 225 CS in this game. The other mid laner I was against is at 132. I was up 100 CS on him. And we were losing that game really hard. Like, that was like 3-22 or something was that game, right? If we look over at, and I'm not very good at CSing. I'm a support. Like, I don't even CS that well most of the time. And that's what's so great about the Malzahar, is he helps you out. Even if you're not that great at CSing, you can do it. Here, I had 404 CS. This dude had 212. I was up 200 CS. Once again, it's against a Fizz who's not, like, known for the best CS in the game, right? And I was at fights, too. I had 14 kills, right? 22 kills and assists combined. So I was places, and I was doing damage to champions. Look, 46,000 damage to champions. So it's not like I was just AFK farming side lanes the whole time and not participating in fights. I was farming the entire map and participating in fights the whole time. And that's why Malzahar is so strong, is that, he just has such tremendous wave clear, such good presence in team fights, good CC with his ult, good silencing with his Q. He just got it all going on. Okay? So I suspect, if they end up nerfing out, they have nerfed Cassiopeia. If they nerf enough of these mid laners, you might even see Malzahar start showing up in pro play. He's very, very good. He's very consistent. Very strong champion. So one build that I do that's a little bit different than most other people is Predator. I got a couple of reasons for this if we look at League runes here. Number one, it's going to really play into this heavy macro pressure that you can do as Malzahar, right? So if you have Predator, that's going to let you push in and roam to those side lanes even faster. It's going to let you back to pick up things like your, like a mana item or something to complete your Ludens or complete your Tome or whatever. And allow you to run back to the lane faster so you don't have to use your teleport. So you can save your teleport to rotate to side lanes or whatever. So number one is it just gives you a lot of extra mobility around the map. Just forget the damage for a second. It basically, you have a ghost, like basically summoner spell ghost, that's on 150-second cooldown, 2.5 minutes, that you get on your boots, which in and of itself is already pretty powerful, right? But then also this damage adds up. It's 25% of your AP, and then it also has 40% of your bonus AD, which you're not going to get a lot of AD on Malzahar, but then 60 to 80 base damage. So if we click on this and look at it, kind of in the mid game around, is it going to tell me the levels? Okay. Yeah, around level 9 or so, you're going to be doing between level 9 and level 10, we'll just say 120 damage just for a nice even number. 120 damage, you're probably easily going to have 100 AP by then. With that 25%. So that's pretty good upfront damage. And remember that Malzahar's pattern when you're interacting with other champions is typically going to be all in, right? Because you're going to use all your spells on the minion wave if you just want to AFK push. But if you're trying to all in somebody, he's not a poke champion, right? Like, yeah, you can use your Q to try to poke a little bit, but you can't do that a lot or you're going to run out of mana. And unless you start getting a ton of items. Like when you get to 3 or 4 items, you know, then you can start poking. But in general, you don't do that a ton in the laning phase, I don't think, because you're going to make yourself run out of mana, and you need to be, you know, summoning those minions and using your E to push in the wave and try to get an advantage that way, so that you can roam and help your jungler with scuttle, or, you know, go bottom or ward the enemy raptors or whatever, right? It's much more important to use that mana to just put them into the tower rather than to try to just spam Qs in the laning phase. Okay, so his trade pattern is usually all in if he's trying to interact with champions most of the time. So that means that usually you're only going to have time for like maybe one rotation of spells. Because the main thing that people get, the reason I'm saying all this, the main thing most people get on him is going to be Ahri. Okay, and if we look at Ahri here, its damage at level 9 is going to be 24 damage, right? With only a 0.1 AP ratio. That's it. Level 9, 24 damage. And some people have pointed out, but Ahri can tag them twice off of your E, right? Because usually later on it'll return to you and then bounce back to them. Okay, tags them twice. What is that, 48 damage? Let's say it tags them 3 times, 4 times. Even if it tagged them 4 times, it would still only be 96 damage in an all-in, right? And it would have a 0.4 ratio instead of a 0.25 in that situation. But you're not going to tag them 4 times, right? It's going to be over one way or another. Either you kill them or you didn't kill them, and they're going to flash away most of the time when you have your ult up. So it's just really not that much damage. It's very anemic. Ahri is good on champions in the mid lane that also have a shield of sorts. So like an Orianna, Ahri's great on Orianna because you can harass with it early, and then you can combine it later to turn it into a shield to help your allies out with the E. Or like on someone like Sona, for example, or Nami. A lot of supports like Ahri because you do the damage early, but you also have a shield later. I just don't think that most champions are going to be that great with Ahri if they're in the mid lane, if they don't have a shield, and especially if their trade patterns are not for light trades. Some champions that have really light trades, just constantly want to just poke and just do a little bit of damage here and there, maybe a Talia or something like that. I could see maybe taking Ahri, although I think that Comet's probably better on those champions. But by and large, Ahri, if you're not using the shield portion, it's just not going to be worth it. I don't know why, you know, it just seems like a lot less damage, to me anyways. And you have so many other good things that you can take in the domination tree that interact with him. So first of all, you have Predator, which we just talked about, right? Basically gives you a free ghost, lets you rotate to the side lanes, lets you run back to lane faster so you get more favorable back timings, gives you more damage and burst in an all-in situation. Can potentially help you get away from ganks. You know, if you're pushing a side lane, you catch on a ward, you see the junglers rotating up to you, you can go, oh crap, and Predator and run away. Nothing says you have to be running towards people to get that bonus. And it lasts for a long time, right? It lasts for 15 seconds. So you can actually use it to run away from stuff too. Now, you can't cast it if you're actively in combat, but I believe even if somebody hits you, if it's not CC, I don't think it knocks you out of this. I think. They can interrupt you if you take damage. But once you start it, once you have completed it, you get those 15 seconds until you deal damage to somebody. So, first of all, that's really good. Second of all, Taste of Blood, also really good. Why is this? Because it helps sustain you in the laning phase, right? If they hit you with a couple of things, anything can hit them, right? Maybe the Malefic Visions bounces to him and hits him. Maybe you hit him with a Q. Maybe you auto-attack him. Maybe a minion walks over and hits him. Anything can trigger Taste of Blood, and that gives you back a nice little chunk of health during the laning phase, okay? Then you have a nice scaling ability here. Eyeball collection, right? So when you get up to 20 stacks, completing gives you an additional 10 ability power adaptive. Okay, and then what does it go up to? Up to 20 ability. Okay, so you could go up to 30 ability power. So that's pretty decent. It's not as good as Gathering Storm, but I think a lot of times it's going to come online a little bit faster, but realistically, this is probably going to be the weakest rune that you have, right? And so this is your weak one. I would say it's maybe a little bit weaker than something like Absolute Focus or something like Transcendence or something like that. But Ravenous Hunter is the big key here. This helps out so much. So healing is reduced on area of effect abilities. I don't think that the Malefic Vision counts as area of effect, though. I think it's single target. I don't know about the minions, but either way, this gives you a lot of healing because most of your damage is going to be done with the Malefic Visions. Like, one cast of that just does, like, an insane amount of damage to an entire minion wave, right? So the amount of health that you're getting relative to how much mana you're spending is tremendous with this. So it's super, super strong. And so what you're giving up with that standard build, you're giving up Ahri so that you can get Predator. I think that's a massive, massive upgrade. You're giving up something. You don't even have to give up Mana Flow Band because you can go and you can get... you can also take Mana Flow Band and Absolute Focus. So basically what it comes down to is, would you rather have Predator and Eyeball Collection, or probably Ahri and either Absolute Focus or Gathering Storm, right? So I think that's what it comes, and you're going to get Mana Flow either way. And I would much rather be on the other side of that, right? I'd much rather have the Predator, the Ravenous Hunter, and then take kind of the dinky Eyeball Collection, because I think the other stuff makes up for it more. And you can still get the Mana Flow. You can still get either Absolute Focus or Gathering Storm, whichever one you want. So that's what I would get on Malzahar. So, you know, I understand the logic behind Ahri. Or, you know, this is another build that I had down here that you can get. You could even skip the Mana Flow and Absolute Focus, especially after they nerfed Absolute. It's still pretty good. Not as good as it once was, though. But you can take Minion Dematerializer and Cosmic Insights. That's going to give you even more cooldown reduction. It gives you cooldown reduction on your boots when you have Predator. A lot of people forget about that, but Cosmic lowers the cooldown on that. It lowers the cooldown on your summoners, like your Flash, your Teleport, and it lowers the cooldown on all of your abilities. So it's a very cost-efficient rune, especially if you're getting summoners and items. If you're getting active items with it, then it can be really strong. And Minion Dematerializer just fits right in with the theme of just push everything as fast as possible, especially early on when you get that very first push on the cannon minion. It gives you a great chance to go back, buy, get a couple of amp tomes, and then, or just like get an amp tome, boots, and like a control ward, and then just Predator back to lane. Then you're going to have priority on them. And then you're still going to have your teleport as well. So if they ever back, they're going to be losing a couple of minion waves, especially if they don't have teleport. And if they do have teleport, they're going to have to use their teleport to come back, and you're still going to have yours in your back pocket. So it's a very good sort of timing thing to have Minion Dematerializer when you also have Predator. So you get that preferable back. But these are the runes that I recommend. Like I said, you could also go Mana Flow and Absolute Focus if you want, but I'm a huge, huge believer in this. I just think it sustains up so well. It scales way better later on into the game. It's just fantastic. Then you just want to go Sorcerer Boots, Ludens as fast as possible, and then I think either Rylai's or Leandries, you can choose which one you want first. Rylai's is going to give you more control, more slowing. Leandries is going to give you more raw damage. So it's kind of up to you. I have dropped getting the Morellonomicon after the most recent nerf. It's like, it's okay. Getting the Spell Pin is fine. But I think completing the Leandries Rylai's package is going to be much stronger at the end of the day. Okay. Let's go a little bit faster here. Just always want to spend a long time talking about the first couple of picks. Okay. Just so people really understand what the reasoning is there. And so you can kind of hopefully get ahead of the trend. Because not everyone's playing Malzahar yet. But he is rising in popularity a little bit, and he's rising in win rate as well, as some of these other more aggressive laners fall off a little bit. Okay, Ahri is another one who's really strong. She's just a good, well-rounded champ. Like, she's not the best at anything in particular, but she's pretty good at almost everything. You know, she has solid wave clear. She has pretty good sustain in the lane. She has really, really good safety with her ult, so she can use that to go out. She can use that to go in. It does quite a bit of total damage, so maximum single target damage is going to be, you know, at level 11, 270 with over a 1.0 AP ratio. It's quite a bit of damage. It's on a fairly low cooldown of 130 seconds. Charm at level 1 is a 1.4 second CC, which is huge. It also increases your damage by 20%. So she can just completely blow up squishies. If she hits this Charm and then casts, you know, Foxfire, Deception Orb, and then dashes into you with Spirit Rush, and you're like a squishy support or just anything that's squishy, you're dead, basically. And then she's going to be able to get back out as well with Spirit Rush. So just allows her to reposition, to do that damage, to dodge skill shots, to get a good angle for Charm. Then she just kind of has some generic abilities like Foxfire, which does some decent damage, and then pretty good wave clear with her Orb of Deception, especially if you get a bit of AP. It scales very well. So it does 280 base damage with a 0.7 ratio, but you got to remember that half of that is true damage. So it's not entirely mathematically accurate, but you can consider true damage like pretty close to double damage in many cases. And so just as kind of shorthand. So really she has somewhere closer to like 400 total damage on this when you max this out with like a 1.0 ratio. So she's going to be very, very strong. So good wave clear, good all-in assassination, great safety, great rotations, pretty good team fight presence. You know, this can hit multiple people. The Spirit Rush, Foxfire can hit. I don't think that hits multiple, but it's guaranteed to pretty much hit somebody. And then Orb of Deception can also hit multiple people. So pretty good overall. So she's not going to have as much like, you know, boom, you completely disappear in like 0.1 seconds like a LeBlanc that's really fed, or as much, you know, tankiness as something like a Galio. But she's just going to be a really nice jack of all trades, I think. Now, in higher elos, you may not see her as much because Malzahar is very good against her because you can lock her down with your ult so she can't get away. And then champions like Lissandra are also going to be pretty good against her because, once again, point-click CC. So anything that has, like, really reliable CC is going to be a pretty strong pick into her. But champs that don't have a lot of CC, champs that are really stationary, that don't have a lot of great ways to dodge things, so like an Orianna or a like a Zoe or something like that, you know, she can potentially get on him and kill him pretty quickly. Or like a Karthus. She can be pretty good. Okay, so good all-around champion. I would just go Electrocute, Sudden Impact, because you get so many dashes off your ult. It's going to give you that extra spell pin, and then Eyeball Collection, Ravenous Hunter, and then just Transcendence and Gathering Storm just for a little bit more scaling. And then to Sorcerer Boots, Ludens. I think people are still going Oblivion Orb, and then they're skipping the rest of Morello and just going for Death Cap. But getting the Oblivion Orb plus Sorcerer Boots is a really nice power spike with Ludens, and then just going for that raw damage after that is probably going to be a solid deal. Okay, so Ahri still strong. Next up is Vlad. I think Vlad is the highest rising star in mid lane. This guy's a total menace. He's also a triple threat. So if people have asked me, who do I expect to see more of in pro play on 9.3, I would say Vlad is going to be one of the highest rising stars. I think players are going to start playing 9.3 starting next week. It might be starting this weekend. I'm not sure how far behind they are. But he's a really good champion. He does a lot of damage. He's one of the best, like, 1v9 type of champions out there. You know, Ahri and Malzahar are pretty good at farming, pretty good at sort of single target burst. Vlad can start blowing up entire teams. Now, he doesn't have any CC like the other champions, so that's something that's definitely a knock to him. But his raw damage output and his sustain, he's a very good bully in the laning phase with his Q. He doesn't have to buy a mana item, so he doesn't have to invest that mana in something like a Ludens, and that's so powerful. That's what's made champions like Aatrox, like Akali, you know, Vlad, some of these champions that just don't have to worry about mana as much. Historically, it's made them very strong. Because remember, the mana's not free, right? If you want to buy Ludens, part of the price is paying for that 600 mana, and 600 mana is worth about like 800 gold value. So that means that Vlad effectively is getting to save something like 800 gold because he doesn't have to buy mana. He doesn't have to get Ludens, right? And so it's obviously very, very strong. It's like he gets a free 800 gold in his pocket just because he doesn't use mana at the start of the game. And so he does pretty good point-click damage. 9-second cooldown, does 80 damage, also heals for 20, and then has a 0.35 ratio on it, a 0.6. It's not the most eye-popping damage ever. It just barely goes up. It has a nice base level stat, but only goes up to 160 over time. But it's this empowered damage that ends up being pretty crazy. That's almost 300 damage with a 111 over a 1.0% ratio, right? And so that's a ton of damage. It also heals him for an extra amount. Heals for an additional, like, a lot when he goes through with that. So a lot of Vlad is playing around, setting up your empowered Q, so queuing people twice, watching that yellow bar, and then right whenever that's about to go off, then that's when you start going for your all-in, right? That's when you ult somebody, Q them, start charging up your Tides of Blood. If they try to CC you, then you go under them with Sanguine Pool, Tides of Blood, blows up, does a lot of its damage, then you should be able to get off one more Q on them, and then they're going to blow up from the ult. So that's enough to all in and just completely delete a lot of people. And a lot of this is AoE. So that Q damage is going to be on a single person, but the Tides of Blood damage is going to be on everybody, and it has a 0.8 AP ratio. So yeah, the 180 damage, not that much. It is 6% of your max health on top of that, so if you end up with like 3,000 health, you know, it's an extra 180 damage, which getting to 3,000 health is not that hard on Vlad, given his passive, which is every you know, every time that you end up getting AP, it turns into bonus health, right? Or every time you get health, it turns into bonus AP, right? So he gains 2.5% bonus ability power as health, and 140% of his AP is bonus health. So if you get to like 300 AP, then you're gonna be getting like an extra 300 or 400 health. So It's not that unusual for him to get to a number that high. I mean, even at 2,000 health, it's still going to be a 300 base damage spell that can hit everybody that's on a 5-second cooldown potentially that has a 0.8 ratio. It's pretty strong. Obviously, the ultimate is going to do a good chunk of damage as well, and it increases from all sources, not just you, but everyone on your team does an additional 10% damage for 4 seconds to people. And it's just going to give you an insane heal, right? So Vladimir's healed for every champion damaged by the detonation. So, you know, in the mid game, if you damage everybody, you can get up to 750 damage. So it's not dependent on how much damage you deal to them. It's just dependent on how many targets you hit, right? So you're probably not going to get that dream scenario of the 1,000 heal, you know, with 200% AP ratio, but you'll get a lot. And so when you combine this with the empowered healing off of his transfusion, and when you start taking things like, you know, Ravenous Hunter and Taste of Blood and things like that, you get a lot of healing. So I think that Vlad's very strong. Good harassment early, good AoE, pretty good wave clear once you start getting a bit of mana. Starts to get very oppressive at level 9 when this goes to a 5-second cooldown. And he gets to sort of cheat the system in terms of his gold, right? Because he doesn't have to buy mana items, and he can get things like Proto Belt, which are super efficient on him because he's going to be stacking a ton of AP that's going to make Proto Belt's damage even higher, and that's going to allow him to get closer to people if they try to get away, to make sure he's in range to get his Q off or to get his Tides of Blood off. So Proto Belt on him is very, very strong, and then just going Death Cap right after Proto Belt just gives him a tremendous amount of power. So it's just Sork Boots, Proto Belt, Death Cap. Once you get to these, it's off to the races. You're probably just going to start deleting people. And so he's very, very good. And he does nice sustained damage in team fights too. So he has that burst that we just talked about. But because of his Q, and once you start getting all that healing off your Ravenous Hunter, once you get some kills and assists, you're just going to have, like, insane sustain. It's going to be very difficult for people to finish you off. So I think that Vlad can definitely be a super strong champ. Okay, and then this is kind of the standard, the Phase Rush, Nimbus Cloak, then Transcendence, Gathering Storm, Footwear, Cosmic Insight. That's what most people are going to get. I don't know. I'm going to change this. I just think that getting Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter, there's not like a super consensus on this. Pros do different things here. But I just think that's too much to pass up. Like, those two in particular just give you such insane sustain during the laning phase. And this will just give you a lot more speed so that you can kite people, run around, deal damage to them. That's really kind of the name of the game with him, is he just wants as much speed as possible. I still do think that Predator can be very good on him. You could even go Ingenious Hunter, because you're going to have Predator and Proto Belt, and that'll put all of that on a much lower cooldown, so you can roam around a lot more. That's going to give you more upfront burst damage, because Phase Rush doesn't give you any damage, just gives you speed. Predator gives you quite a bit of extra damage, and it gives you the speed, so you can close in to get that initial damage, but it doesn't give you the speed while you're actively in combat running around. So most people are going to go Phase Rush. I still think there could be a space for Predator in there somewhere, but this is kind of most of the standard of what people are going to get. Okay, so Vlad going to be super strong. I expect it high low, and then the pro scene, he's going to be one of the rising champs for sure on 9.3 after the nerfs to things like Cassiopeia, Irelia, Urgot got nerfed a couple of patches ago, Aatrox. We might start moving away from those, at least in some situations. Start seeing champions like Vlad, start seeing champions like Viktor. Oh, I forgot about Viktor on here. We'll just talk about Viktor then. We'll talk about Viktor, because I do think that Viktor is a pretty good rising star. We'll throw him in here under honorable mentions. I meant to put him in there, and then while I was making this list, I went out. We went out to dinner with my in-laws and my wife, and I just totally forgot to put him on there. But we'll talk about him. Let's just go ahead and talk about him right now. I think that Viktor could be tier 1, maybe tier 2. I would probably put him in tier 2 for solo queue, up somewhere near Zoe and Lissandra in here. And it's kind of a new build of Viktor that people have been doing lately. So people have moved away from the Q-Max plus Iceborne Gauntlet, and they're going more towards just the heavy AP build. He's picking up steam quite a bit. 1,000 games, 54%, kind of at the highest level. And then people are getting to that Ahri later on. Once again, I'm not entirely sure about this because I don't think he has any heal. Klepto is if you're against a melee matchup, so you see Klepto is against things like Irelia, Yorick, like this is what people will take top lane, but it's harder to proc that Klepto consistently against a ranged champion. So, I mean, a lot of people are getting are getting Ahri. You can actually trade with that in the laning phase. Unlike Malzahar, you know, your trading pattern, you are going to be going up trying to hit people with your Death Ray Blast, with your Qs and things like that. So Ahri makes a little bit more sense here, but I don't know. I still feel like there could be better options. I still feel like you could take Klepto more often, or you could even take something like Unsealed Spellbook more often. I'd have to like watch and see some of the numbers about how much damage Ahri's actually doing in these games. But yeah, so it's usually either Klepto or Ahri, and then people are maxing the they're evolving the Death Ray first. So I believe they evolve Death Ray, and then I think it's Q after that. I'm not a Viktor expert, but I do know that it's Death Ray first. And a lot of people are going towards this kind of Ludens into Witchbane kind of build, or like Ludens into Hourglass, depending on the matchups, I suppose. But it's just getting like a heavier AP build. And then just getting that wave clear back off of your E. Let me pull him up here real quickly, because his E still does a lot of damage. All of these nerfs to Viktor kind of in recent memory have been to his Q. But to be fair, some of the buffs that brought him back into the meta were also buffs to the Q. But it's totally possible that Viktor has been viable for a while, and people just haven't really got on board with that. And I think that like even something like a Death Cap eventually could be pretty good, because I think he has really nice ratios. Yeah, I mean, this has like basically a 1.3 if you hit him with both parts of it. That's a lot of damage. That's 410 base if you hit him with the normal one plus the Aftershock, and then a 1.3 ratio. It does get pretty mana intensive, but I think that most people are probably just going for the... I think people are going full evolve first. Let me see. Before they finish it. I know it's like definitely... oh, it's not going to say when they get the evolution. Oh, yeah. Okay. So you get first evolution, which is your E for the wave clear. Then you go for the Ludens, and then you go for the full evolve. Okay. That makes sense. And then you can evolve your other abilities and get pretty strong. And then it looks like he was going towards Death Cap after that. And that's something that sounds pretty good to me. And then you max your Death Ray, and then your Q next, and then your Gravity Field after that. Materializer is very good on these wave clear type of champions, so I think it makes perfect sense on Viktor. And then you know, going something like Mana Flow Band is pretty good. Still not sure about Ahri, but I guess, you know, I guess that's what everybody's doing, or a lot of people are doing that. So I do think that he can be pretty good. He has nice wave clear, has pretty good zone control and utility in team fights. So he's got that gravity field, he's got that ult, which can cause a lot of disruption. Does pretty good, just sort of burst damage off of this. If someone gets trapped in this, then he can hit him with, you know, Death Ray and Chaos Storm and do a ton of damage. So that initial damage is going to hit him for, you know, 170 with a 0.5. Then every time it ticks is an additional amount there. And I think the ticks are pretty fast, right? So conjures it up, the singularity is active, dealing magic damage to all nearby every 2 seconds. Remains active for 6.5 seconds. The total damage. So that looks like it should tick, what, four times? 4 times and some change? 6 times? Wait, has it ticked 6 times if it only ticks every 2 seconds? And it lasts for 6.5 seconds. I don't know, whatever. It does a lot of damage. Okay, so he has wave clear with his E. He has he can kite for himself. He can shield himself with his Q. It's very spammable in kind of the mid game once you get it leveled up, especially once you get that second evolve on this, and it gives you the extra movement speed and the extra shield and all that stuff. So he comes online. He's a little bit slower than some of the other champions in the past, but the game is slowing down a little bit. He's probably not going to get bullied out as much by things like Cassiopeia in the laning phase. I think people are starting to pick him into things like Lissandra, Zoe, stuff like that, because he can kind of keep up with them, and he's going to have better wave clear over time than they are. So I think at higher brackets, so like Pro Play and Challenger, you're definitely going to see a lot more Viktor. I think that Vlad and Viktor are both going to rise up in priority quite a bit. Viktor is even being seen in the Korean scene in the bot lane a lot of times, because he does have that wave clear. He does have that protection with his Q. He does have follow-up. If you have an aggressive bot laner like a Thresh or something, he can drop that gravity field on hooks and things like that. So he does have some nice interactions. He does scale pretty well. So I expect Viktor, especially this AP Emax first type of Viktor, to start becoming a bit more powerful. So where he fits into the tier list overall, I'd probably put him somewhere in tier 2. I think he can be good, but I think that these are going to be a little bit better near the top. Okay. Then we have Cassiopeia. So I've talked about Cassio a lot in past videos. She's still going to be really strong. They did nerf her Q on this patch. They nerfed her W, so they did take a lot of damage off of her. But I think she still is probably, like, pretty good. Let me see. I didn't look statistically. She's definitely lost a couple of percentage points. She was at, like, 51, 52%. But she's still at 50%. She still has really nice wave clear early on with her Q, and then, like, getting the refund off of her E. Still has pretty good scaling. She has great ranges on her abilities. Especially her Q, so she can still harass, still scales really well over time. Remember that a lot of her damage in the late game is not that Q damage. It might look like a lot, like, oh, you know, they took off whatever damage from her, like 30 damage, 40 damage off of her Q. That does hurt, but that's mostly in kind of the early to early mid game. It's the late game, it's her E that does most of the damage, and that damage scales up per level over time. And so she's still going to have a ton of damage. She's still got utility. Her miasma still stops people from flashing. Still gives a lot of zone control in team fights. It's really annoying to get around. Pretty decent protection for the AD carry also with her miasma and her ult. So she's still going to be a very good team fighter. Still has tremendous scaling. She's definitely going to be knocked down a little bit. Not like as insanely high as she was, but I still think she's going to be picked. I still think she's going to be strong. She was excessively powerful. They dialed it back a little bit. That was a smart idea, but she's still going to be strong. So you're still going to do the same kind of build that I mentioned, that I've discussed in the past. You end up Q-maxing on Cassiopeia, and like this was the revolution that people came up with back in December on Cassiopeia that sort of brought her back into the spotlight, was you could max Q first, completely ignore E, because all you get by leveling up E is 20 bonus damage every time, so you're paying 10 mana for 20 damage, which is a terrible, like, investment, because most of the damage is based on the AP ratio and is based on per level, right? You don't get any cooldown reduction, you get barely any damage, so E-maxing is trash, and that's what people had been doing for a long time, because back in the day, that's what you used to do with Cassiopeia, but a lot of the nerfs to her, you know, many, many years ago were to her E, right? And so they left her Q alone. I think they even ended up buffing her Q a little bit over the past couple of years to try to make her viable again. But they took the damage down a little bit. It still has a nice ratio on it. Still has pretty decent, you know, damage. I think it used to do 255 at max. Now it deals 215. You know, they did bump up the ratio a little bit. It doesn't completely offset that, but, you know, when you get to like 100 AP, you're only losing, you know, 30 damage instead of 40. You get to 200 AP, you're only losing 20 damage. So it's still okay. It still gives you a lot of bonus movement speed, but this was the innovation, is that you can actually go Comet. You don't have to go Phase Rush, because Phase Rush does no damage. This is why I'm skeptical of things like, you know, like Vlad, where it's just like people get Phase Rush because it's common knowledge, but, you know, for years and like for at least a year or two, if people had done this on Cassiopeia, it had always been that way. She hadn't been changed for a while. Some stuff did change in the meta, right, Rory? Yeah, some stuff changed in the meta, but if people had actually just innovated a little bit, stopped getting Phase Rush, and started, you know, trying out some other things, then they could have found out this OP Cassiopeia build a lot earlier, I think. So that's why it's like, yeah, everybody gets Phase Rush, you know, everybody gets Ahri on Malzahar, everybody gets Phase Rush on Vlad, but there could be these other options. Oh, she's climbing up with her little tongue sticking out, aren't you, Rory? Yeah. Yeah, it's a camera. Here, come here. No. Don't mess with that. But you can sit over here if you want to for a little bit. But yes, that was the innovation, and that's still in place. You just Q max, then max miasma second, take Comet, all of the dot damage off of your I need to make sure she doesn't mute me here. All of the damage off of you'll still get all of that off of Comet, off the AoE damage. When you're spamming your Twin Fangs, it's going to lower the cooldown on Comet a lot too. So those were the major innovations, whereas maxing Q allowed you to not have to take Phase Rush because you get more movement speed off of the Q, and then that allows you to run Comet, which gives you a lot more damage over time. That also frees you up to take things like Ravenous Hunter and Taste of Blood to give you a lot more sustain in the laning phase. So I still think she's going to be strong. Knocked down a little bit from where she was, but particularly if you're well practiced on her, she can be great. She's one of the harder mid laners to play in the game, but because positioning is so important, and she's almost like an AD carry where you have to, you know, just constantly kite people and hit them with those Twin Fangs, but still overall going to be pretty strong. Okay, Karthus, still going to be strong. People have asked me before, what's up with Karthus? A lot of people ask me in the jungle, what's up with him? That's another one that's just like, it's a funky thing. People like just didn't think about it for a while. Eventually they tried it out, worked out really well. You know, that's the beauty of League. It's not really a solved game. People do come up with innovations, and they can be good. And I know sometimes people recommend crazy stuff in my chat. They're like, oh, what about this? You know, what about Jarvan support? What about these other things? A lot of the innovations fail, right? A lot of them aren't quite as good as, like, maybe they seem to be on paper, or maybe as, like, some of the all caps videos hype them up to be. But some of them actually are. So something like Karthus Jungle, really wacky, but ends up working. Something like Malzahar support, you know, couple of years ago, really strong, right? Something like Cassiopeia with Qmax was an innovation. And so this has been one of those innovations. Now, one thing that happened to Karthus during the preseason that was tremendous for him was they decoupled the stats that you get from the rune tree that you choose. So that means that he was allowed to take the precision tree without having to get that stupid attack speed stat. So he could still get 20 AP, right, Rory? That's Daddy, yeah. That's Daddy talking, and that's you. She's looking at the second monitor over here. Yeah, that's us. But now he can go Presence of Mind. They also changed Presence of Mind, which was a big deal. Yeah, it's Rory. That's you. Look. Yeah. Yeah, it's you. Yeah, isn't that weird? It's you. Yeah. But that's the innovation.
Mommy
is
and Mommy.
El Mommy? She said El Mommy. Here, go find Mommy. Let's let Daddy finish up this video. What do you think? It's fun hanging out, but yeah, you probably need to go to bed. It's like 8:30, dear. We got to get up in the morning. Okay. Go find Mommy. Go find El Mommy. Okay, she wants back up. Anyways, okay, come on. Presence of Mind plus Ultimate Hunter, which they also buffed Ultimate Hunter and Presence of Mind sometime near the end of last season or during the preseason. They buffed those things. So that just means that his ult is going to be up like all the time. And now they've nerfed a lot of the early aggression junglers. You know, they've nerfed the Xin Zhao. Well, I guess they didn't directly nerf Xin Zhao. They nerfed Camille. They slowed down jungle experience. They did a lot of things that have slowed the game down and make Karthus stronger because then he has more time to scale up. But even in the mid lane still, he's good. He kind of fits a similar build to Malzahar that I mentioned earlier, right? Where you can just hardcore power farm the lane, and then you can go and start power farming the jungle as well. You know, you can start stealing enemy raptors. You can take Scuttle. You take dragons, barons really quickly. If your jungler's out counter jungling them or just ganking a lot, not clearing their camps, you can go grab their wolves, grab their raptors, just start grabbing everything. So you just power farm the map, basically, just go to 400 CS, and then you win the game. So it's very similar to Malzahar. The major difference is he doesn't have as much, like, single kill threat as Malzahar does, or like gank assist. He doesn't have that point-click CC. Rory, what are you doing? He doesn't have that point-click CC. I don't know how much you guys can hear of her in the background, but here, why don't you just chill for a second. Here, look at this. It's a raptor. It's a rapper. Look at that. Whoa, what is that? He doesn't have that much CC, but he has so much pressure and so much gank, if you want to think about it that way, because he doesn't even have to leave his lane to gank. He just presses R. Has a lot of pressure, and this keeps farming, right? So he doesn't even have to try to rotate down to bot lane. He can just non-stop push over and over and over again, start farming the jungle. Something weird happens bot lane. All right, go down. Oh, she's putting on her glasses. Here you go, Rory, look. Oh, aren't you cool? Yeah. Yeah, it's a cool baby. That's a cool one. So, yeah, very strong. He is susceptible to assassins. People are backing off the assassins a little bit more lately, though. But he can still farm very safely, even against assassins, right? So you can still lay waste from 875 range away, so you can just kind of power farm your lane. If you're really good with that lay waste, you can even get really aggressive in the laning phase. Like, you can step up to him and just, like, run him down with lay waste. It does a lot of damage. I mean, it does double damage to champions, and it's on a 1-second cooldown if you can get, or double damage if it's an isolated target. He has a ton of DPS. Even if you, like, kind of feed a little bit, you know, you can still scale up later on in the game. Even if you get assassinated in a team fight, you can still press R and do a lot of damage. So that gives him a very, very high level of consistency. He's extremely strong. If you don't completely lock this guy out of the game and just like murder him and end the game by 20 to 25 minutes, he can take over by himself. Now, one reason why you might say, well, why is he not number 1? Well, he is still extremely powerful. You know, some people might have him at number 1. I think he deserves to be tier 1, but the problem also is that champions like Sona are also extremely powerful right now. Sona, Soraka. So a lot of enchanters who are going to have healing, who are going to be able to take redemption and lock it against him. So all of that stuff. Go show mommy. Go show mommy. Go find mommy. Mommy's in there. Go show her. You got your raptor. You got your I keep calling it a raptor. You got your rapper. Yeah, go show her. Go show. Hey, honey, what are you doing? Yeah, can you get her? I'm trying to do a video, and it's like 8:30. It's okay, Rory. We're going to hang out in the morning. Oh, come here. Here. You're going to have to get her. She's not going to leave. But anyways, Karthus going to be very strong. And then Lissandra is still going to be very strong. You're going to have to come get her, dear. Lissandra is still going to be very strong. Now, if this was like a challenger level tier list or like a pro tier list, Lissandra would definitely be tier 1. The reason that I have her a bit lower is I think of her as more of a role player. She just doesn't have the raw kind of like damage numbers, especially sustained damage as something like a Malzahar or as something like a Cassiopeia or a Karthus or whatever. Yeah. Is it night-night? I think it was night-night like 30 minutes ago, Rory. Yeah. But anyways, so yeah, has a lot of CC, has that point-click lockdown. She can actually engage really well. They did do some changes to her. They nerfed her a little bit last patch. One thing for like the really savvy Lissandras, you can no longer put your Ice Claw into terrain where people can't see it and then just all of a sudden show up on top of them. So that's one thing they changed about her. They did nerf her mana cost a little bit. You know, we'll see how it goes. One thing about Lissandra that made her really strong, which is very similar to Vlad, is she didn't have to get a mana item because her mana costs were so low. They did increase them. It doesn't seem like it's much, but it was like 8 extra mana at max level. That is 10% extra mana, and that does add up over time. And so part of this is, you know, you might have to get a Ludens now, which is going to slow down her scaling a pretty good chunk. But I just feel like you can't really like run around and farm everything on the map. You know, it's just a lot harder to farm. She does have decent wave clear. It's just not as good as Malzahar. It's not as good as Karthus. It's not as good as a lot of champions that are sort of these top tier champions. Not as good as Cassiopeia. But it can be decent. She's also really short range, so she only has 725 range, which is not a lot. It does make her vulnerable to a bunch of other all-ins, but she is very nice against assassins because she's got sort of her CC here to root them. She can point-click ult them. She can get away with Glacial Path. So she does have a lot of tools at her disposal, and she's really good in team fights because of her new passive. Well, new. It was like in the last 5 or 6 patches. But this subjugation to add on a whole bunch of extra slows and a whole bunch of extra damage is pretty good on her. I just think that she's kind of best on 1 or 2 items once she gets Proto Belt and then Zanya's. And then after that, she can get other items, of course, but she's just going to fall off. Like, her ratios are a lot lower than other champions. She only has a 0.7 on her Ice Shard, 0.3 on her Ring, only a 0.6 when you hit the enemy with this. So these ratios are much, much lower over time. And her AoE is like, the amount of damage is kind of limited. It's okay, but it's nowhere near like Vlad AoE or Karthus AoE or you know, a lot of these other types of champs that you'll see. So she is good. She is a role player, but you have to trust that your team is not going to be a bunch of turkeys, basically, and that's a lot to ask in solo queue. So you can kind of take over by yourself, you know, if you push, if your jungler sort of shows up and you can get some kills off of Frozen Tomb, you can perform really well, but she's not like the 1v9 champion, right? You're not going to completely take over the game by yourself as Lissandra most of the time in the same way that you could do it with Vlad, the same way you can do it with a number of assassins or Cassiopeia or whatever. So she's good. It's just I think that her utility is extremely high, and she gets to cheat the system a little bit and get that proto belt, kind of like Vlad. And she has like a really nice power spike kind of in the mid game off of 1 or 2 items. She just starts to fall behind a bit because her ratios just aren't as high as other champions. Now, part of that is because her passive does give extra damage. It does have ratios. So that's definitely a thing to keep in mind. But I think that she does start to fall off in the mid to late game. Okay, and you just want to go Aftershock, so that makes it very difficult to kill her as well. Aftershock, Demolish, Bone Plating, Overgrowth, and then Mana Flow Ban and Transcendence. Okay, Zoe is another one that I think has been rising up a little bit in pro play. I think that she is really good in solo queue as well. I don't know what her win rate is. She's a pretty difficult champion to play for how much people say that she's like, I don't know, just really unfair, super easy. She actually does have some problems. Let me see where she is. I think she's probably like 48%, 49%, 49%. But like her wave clear has dipped off quite a bit with some of the changes to her Q back last year. But she still has great assassination, potential. Even off of like one item, if she hits you with that bubble, you're dead. A lot of times, even if she doesn't hit you with the bubble, if she hits you with a Q, you're probably going down. And she can just spam these Qs, spam this R just over and over and over again and just try to pick people off. And so that makes her very annoying, very powerful, very versatile to an extent. So she's pretty decent. The fact that she also gets like just those random item actives and abilities can completely turn fights around. If she picks up like a Locket or a Redemption or something like that, then that can make her strong. I think in general, let's see, people probably just go Ahri with her to start or Comet. I didn't actually double check her runes there. Yeah, and I think it's just going to be the Luden's Oblivion Orb, just kind of the double pin path. Now, this did get nerfed some because, Oblivion Orb is a lot weaker than it used to be, and especially Morellonomicon if you complete it. But I think you can still go like Sorcerer, Luden's, Oblivion Orb, and then Death Cap or something like that and do a ton of damage. So, she's pretty good. I think she's probably the best, like, sort of poke champion that's on here. The poke, kind of like long-range burst champion. She's going to be one of the better ones you can pick. So something like a, if you like to play things like Lux or you like to play things like Ziggs, those types of things, and I think that Zoe's going to be the best of kind of that breed just because it's just so much damage if she actually hits you with one of those things. Okay, Galio I still think is going to have some power. He has been nerfed quite a bit. I expect to see him in pro play some. But, kind of like Lissandra, he works much better with organized teams. He does have a lot more raw power than Lissandra does, so I think that you can work with him in solo queue. It's like his ult requires a lot more coordination with your team, though. So if your team has something, though, like a Jarvan. Jarvan's becoming a little bit more popular. Or just a Sejuani, someone who can go in there and start the fight, and then he can follow up, and they can hold him still. Then he can definitely still be pretty strong. Now, they did nerf his Q. It was mostly like, they did nerf damage on it, but I think the mana cost was the really big nerf. I think people are still running him, though. Let me see. Now, his win rate's probably not going to be, yeah, it's like a 45, 46% win rate. So, we'll see. We'll see how that goes, but I do still think that he has potential. He just has a really good kit. I don't know if the numbers are fully there still or not, but it looks like they are, 55% out of the last, almost 500 games with him, so I think he can be good. Now, people are trying, like Tucson and Lahens from Korea are trying him out in the support role a little bit more. To be fair, I haven't tried him a ton in the support role recently. Historically, he hasn't been that amazing. One thing you have to remember is that like Lahens is arguably the best support in the world. He's pretty close. If he's not the best, he's on the best team in the world, I think. Tucson is also extremely strong. So these guys might just be trying this out because their coach wants them to practice to see if it's something, like how often they want to do it in solo queue. So it does kind of skew the results for support a little bit, just because like all of these entries are from Tucson and Lahens at pro play. like, well, not pro play, but like basically, you know, like super high level challenger stuff, like really, really good players. So that kind of skews it a little bit, but I still think that he can be good. People are going to have to get a mana item on him. I believe people are already getting Ludens in mid lane, but you could still get like Ludens and Proto Belt and probably be okay. His wave clear is going to be a little bit weaker, but he still does have great wave clear with the Q and his Justice Punch. He just like churns through that mana a lot faster than something like Malzahar or Karthus or any of these other like 400 farm mid laners that I call them, where you just like power farm the whole map. So he's okay. I just think he definitely has more weaknesses than he used to, but particularly in pro play, you might see him a bit more. I could try this build out at some point, maybe on Viewers Night or something, you know, with this redemption type of thing, and see if that's something that could be good. But, yeah, he's all right. I still think that he has enough power, though, and enough utility. Like, that AoE taunt that you can flash on people can completely win team fights. That ultimate is potentially game-changing. There are just a ton of different things that he can do to impact team fights and do a lot of damage. So, yeah, I think that he deserves to be up here. Maybe he should be tier 3 instead. It's, you know, it's kind of a tough call. But I just went ahead and put him in tier 2 because I think he can be high impact. Okay, Yasuo. Everyone's probably familiar with Yasuo. I think that he can be really high impact, especially against a lot of these mages in the mid lane now. Now that you're not going to see as many like Aurelias, Aatroxes, Urgots, that type of thing. That wasn't super popular at the platinum level and the gold level anyways, but I think that that he can still be pretty strong. Now, they did change crit items, which does impact him, but I think ultimately this will actually be good for him because now he can rush Static Shiv into Infinity Edge, and that's what a lot of people have been running on him. And this is good for a couple of reasons. Number one, he's not going to go over the cap anymore, so it's not going to be a feels bad with the Infinity Edge, and each one of his critical strikes are going to do that extra 25% damage off of Infinity Edge passive now. It depends on who he's fighting against. He already has basically true damage, like it ignores armor. Like crits ignore a certain amount of armor after he ults somebody. So it gains armor penetration. So this is kind of like a non-combo with the old Infinity Edge, the extra 10% damage. And so the fact that it's a flat amount of damage now, the 25% bonus damage on your crits, is actually going to combo much better with the armor penetration here, right? So you are actually going to get extra value out of it, whereas you did not previously get the extra value out of the Infinity Edge passive. So that is pretty nice for him. But the guaranteed crit on the Static Shiv and the fact that Static Shiv is 200 gold cheaper now is going to be very nice on him because that's going to give him a lot more wave clear. So now he can push in and roam, or he can go power farm the jungle as well if he wants to with the Static Shiv, because each one of those Static Shivs hits is going to crit, because he's going to have 100% crit off of 2 items, and it is going to do extra damage off of that Infinity Edge. So I think that's pretty good for him overall. I think it's net positive. He doesn't have the old Phantom Dancer, which does mean he's going to be a bit more vulnerable. Instead of Static Shiv, you can go new Phantom Dancer if you want to, though. That will give him a nice shield. It'll still give him the movement speed, the crit, the attack speed, all of that. But I think that Static Shiv, particularly the reduced price Static Shiv, with the guaranteed crit with Infinity Edge, giving that 25% more damage, is going to be very powerful. So that's what I would take most of the time. But yeah, y'all know Yasuo. He's got the wind wall. It's very disruptive in team fights. It's very disruptive against ranged champions. And, you know, Sweeping Blade gives him a lot of mobility, lets him get in the face of some of these champions that don't have a lot of mobility, you know, in and of themselves. So, like, if you start seeing, like, more... you know, Orianna's, potentially Malzahar's, Talia's, Twisted Fates, just anything that's ranged that, like, can't get into melee combat and, you know, do a lot of damage against him, he could potentially abuse him in lane. So there are a lot of cases where Malzahar can go hardcore feeding. People know that. That's why he's down a bit lower. In the mid lane, especially if there's going to be a lot of jungle pressure, you are seeing more of these kind of hard farm junglers starting to come back into vogue. You're seeing more Udyrs, Nunus, Shyvanas, Iverns, those type of things that aren't going to put as much pressure on you in the laning phase as a Camille or as a Zhao. So maybe that will allow you to go more aggressive, but you just have to be very, very careful with your aggression on Yasuo. But if you time your aggression correctly, I do think he's going to be very strong. And I think particularly kind of this new build that's going to give him a ton of wave clear is going to help him out a lot with his farming and with his ability to roam and his ability to sort of snag some of those jungle camps every now and then as well too. So I think that Yasuo ultimately is going to go up just a little bit on this patch. Okay, Yasuo is a pretty good one to learn, which is a nice sort of secondary. I mean, he does get banned a lot, but he can also be played in 3 lanes. You can play a mid, top, or AD carry, and he does have a pretty good win rate in all of those lanes. So he gets banned a lot, but he's also very versatile. So if you have the ability to play Yasuo, you know, into the right matchups, he could be a pretty good investment of your time. Okay, Aurelion Soul is the final one that I'll mention here for Tier 2. He does have really nice wave clear. The game is slowing down, so he's going to have time to charge up his Rod of the Ages, and then he's going to pick up Rylai's after that. Once he gets Rod plus Rylai's plus Boots of Swiftness, he just has a ton of control in team fights. He's slowing down everybody, makes it very difficult to operate around him. And he has really good roaming and pressure in the side lanes. So if you just AFK push, kind of like Malzahar, right? You AFK push and then go roam the side lanes. He can be very strong. I think he's kind of goofy. He is difficult to play. His CC is very limited. He does have an ult, which knocks people away, but he doesn't have the same kind of lockdown CC that someone like Malzahar has. His damage is also going to be a bit lower earlier on in the game. So he's just kind of an odd duck. You know, I wouldn't recommend playing him unless you intend on one-tricking with him. But, you know, he can be very strong if you learn him. And because the game's slowing down, you're going to have more time to charge up that Rod without getting without like all of your lanes completely getting blown up by 15 minutes. That is going to make him a bit better. Okay, the final 3 that I'll mention here, or the final like Tier 3 that I'll talk about. Anivia, I think I almost put her in Tier 2 because I think she's going to be a solo queue rising star over the next couple of patches just because of how they've nerfed some of the other control mages, right? They've nerfed Lissandra, they've nerfed Galio, they've nerfed Cassiopeia to an extent. And she just has such great wave clear. She's one of those 400 farm junglers, right, where you're going to have more time to charge up your Rod plus your tier now. And you can just push into them so much, right? Just over and over and over again with your ult. Go farm, you know, Scuttle, go farm Raptors, Wolves, whatever. You can just farm everything. And then you have pretty good gank assist, right? So if a jungler shows up and has CC, like a Sejuani jumps in, and then you follow up with your wall plus your stun or something like that, you can get a lot of damage. She also has supremely high wave clear, which is something that a lot of teams just can't deal with, right? A lot of teams don't have it, and a lot of teams can't deal with it. So if you actually fall behind, it's almost impossible to siege you out. Even with Baron, they have to have a good split pusher. So Anivia is fantastic on a team where you have the superior like split pusher. So if they have something like a Malphite on their team, and you have something like a Fiora or a Tryndamere or something like that, eventually your person's going to be able to 1v1 them, and they are not coming through you in the mid lane as Anivia, right? She's probably the best wave clear champ in the game, so they're going to have to go deal with your split pusher. They can't force you into a 4v5 under your tower, or they can, I guess, maybe with something like Malphite, but you're probably going to kill them. And so she has really high damage too. Like, people forget that like her ratios and her damage are through the roof. The only problem is she's kind of slow, and she takes a little while to get going. But her damage is really high, right? It's got a 0.9 with 320 on her Q if you hit somebody with it. Her Frostbite ends up with a 1.0 ratio with a 300 base. And so, you know, and it's on a low cooldown, like a 4-second cooldown. So, like, late game, you've got this Glacial Storm in a team fight, and you're just spamming, you know, Frostbites on people and stunning them with Flash Frost. Like, it's a lot of damage she can put out. Just the only thing is she can't roam to side lanes that well. So, I'm also kind of skeptical. People run Comet on her. I think that's okay, but kind of like Malzahar, I think your mission is really just to kind of farm off early, just get to level 6, push, and then, you know, try to figure out something else you can do, right? So I could even envision taking something. I know it sounds ridiculous, but even taking something like Predator on Anivia, right? Just so you can actually roam and get to those side lanes and maybe make a play, or just so you can get back to lane faster. Or maybe even taking something like Unsealed Spellbook so that you can get Teleport, Ghost, you know, Ignite. Just something to give you more mobility, because I feel like your mobility is really the issue. As Anivia a lot of the time. Maybe trying to get a Spellbinder or something earlier in there. I don't know. She's basically like a piece of siege equipment. Sadie. like randomly got up and ran away super fast. But she's just a piece of siege equipment, you know. She's very good at sieging the enemy towers. She's very good at defending air towers, and she's very good at team fights. Very slow, pretty bad on rotations, pretty bad in 1v1 situations if she gets caught out. So, you know, that does make her a little bit of team reliant, but still, I think that she's very good at what she does. So if you want that on your team, if you want that supreme wave clear, if you want very good team fighting, you know, you already have some initiate on your team somewhere. You have that Sejuani, you have... you know, like an orange support or, you know, a Thresh or something like that. She's going to be really good. She gets kind of like bonus interactions with Crystallize if you have something like an Ornn on your team with that wall or a Vayne that can pin somebody into that wall. Like anyone that interacts with the terrain, Poppy, then Crystallize can get some additional value. But a lot more fights are also being fought around the river area and near chokes because dragons are much more important than ever. Baron is super important, and they both spawn a lot faster. This helps out Anivia a ton because it's going to get people to kind of focus into these chokes. So if you can use that wall, if someone's trying to come down that ramp to get into the river near the dragon pit, you can just throw down that wall, cut half of them off, and then just use your ult and just break them up and kill them all, right? Or like Baron. Someone's trying to come over and check Baron. You could just stun them, wall them in, blow them up with Frostbite. So I think that the more people are fighting around these objectives and fighting in the jungle and stuff like that and not fighting in open areas, then she's going to gain a lot of value out of her kit. So I think she could rise up quite a bit over time. She still has a pretty decent win rate. I mean, she's like almost 52%. She's one of the higher win rate mid laners, I think. Yeah, she's not too far down the list. She's around like 10th or so, but I think she has been trending upward lately as the game has been slowing down. So if you like Anivia, you know, maybe give her a whirl. I still would probably prefer something like Malzahar or Karthus in solo queue, but, you know, she definitely can work. Orianna is another one that I expect to start getting a little bit more play at the pro level. So Galio had completely squeezed Orianna out of the meta because he was sort of the de facto follow-up CC. So you had someone that engaged like a Jarvan or a Rakan in past patches and things like that. And then Galio would just drop down right on top of them. Now, you know, we might go back to a system where Orianna just puts the ball on them as they engage, and then she shockwaves when they go in there. So that's been a classic combo for years and years and years. It just got supplanted by Galio most recently, but now it might be coming back. She has pretty good harassment early on in the game, pretty good wave clear with her W. Excellent protection. That's something that people often forget, is that not only does she have pretty good CC and pretty good like utility and speeding people up, but a lot, like being able to put that shield on someone like a really fed AD carry is excellent, because when you start getting a lot of AP, I'm pretty sure that shield has pretty good scaling as well. It has at least like a 0.5 or a 0.6, maybe even higher. Let's check it out here really quick at the end. I know we're basically out of time, but I just want to talk about those two new ones that might rise up a little bit. With Anivia and Orianna here. Okay, so she's only got a 0.4 on the shield, but pretty high base though, the 220, and it does add some extra armor and magic resist. So this is pretty good for like a protect the Vayne comp, or, you know, protect the Kai'Sa, protect the Jinx type of comp. It could actually be pretty good. So especially in pro play, if we start seeing a protect the Jinx type of thing, which is totally possible. You know, you just run like a Tom Kench and a Jinx with, you know, like Orianna and maybe a Sejuani in the jungle, that type of thing. Could be something that we see a lot more. So pretty good, safe laning phase, just nice, well-rounded. She's not going to completely dominate people in the laning phase probably, but she's probably not going to get dominated herself either if you get proficient on her. Then has really good utility for the rest of your team. So kind of like Lissandra, but... And she might very well get starved out in pro play by Lissandra. Lissandra just might be better at everything, but... I could still see a space for her, especially if you're trying to protect a very specific target, like a Vayne or something like that. So, you know, I think that she might come back. Her numbers are still a little low, you know, a 0.5 on her Q, only a 0.7 on her W. So she has been nerfed over time quite a bit, but only a, you know, 225 with a 0.7 on her ult, although it is a low cooldown. You know, she potentially could still be pretty strong in the right kind of composition. Talon is another one who does have a high win percentage. Is an assassin who's pretty strong. Where is Talon? Okay, it's not like super high, but like a 50% win rate. I don't know. I just feel like Assassins, like, it's getting tough. It's getting really tough for Assassins. There are so many of these mid laners that have some kind of protection, whether it's Lissandra running Aftershock with point click, you know, ways to deal with that, or Cassiopeia, her miasma, her ultimate, Vladimir stacking a ton of health, having his pool, Ahri, you know, having all of her jumps, Malzahar having his point click ult. There's a lot of things that are difficult to deal with, and you're starting to get, you know, a lot of Enchanter supports, which sounds good. It's like, oh, sweet, Sona, I can kill him with Talon. It's like, well, sort of, but, like, once she gets, you know, enough healing and shielding, then it's going to be almost impossible to assassinate anyone unless you're really, really far ahead. She's just going to heal through everything, especially if she takes Barrier and you can't blow her up, and then she also takes something like, you know, Redemption at some point. It just gets very, very difficult to start bursting people down. So you have to snowball hard with Talon, but I think he is one of the better assassins that's still available. Leblanc is another one who's very good. She's a bit harder to play than someone like Talon or Kassadin, but if you do get ahead, she has so much burst that she can delete people, and she can do it pretty safely. If she goes in, tries to delete, doesn't work, usually she can get back out. So we might start seeing some more LeBlanc in pro play as well. Now that some of these other sort of tankier, heavy hitter things are falling out of favor. So LeBlanc still going to be strong, requires a lot of practice. And then finally, Kassadin is a pretty good anti-mage. It requires a long time to scale up with him, though. Usually he has to have Rod. A lot of times he'll take Tier, although you might be able to cheat it and just go like Rod into Lichbane or something like that. But because Lichbane does have some mana on it, but I think a lot of times he still does want Tier. Let me see what the kind of the new hotness is on him. Yeah, most people are still going Tier Rod, so that's going to take a long time to charge up. You can get through the laning phase with kind of your standard kind of fleet footwork, mass regen build, you know, your Ravenous Hunter plus Taste of Blood, like that old build. And a pretty good win rate, you know, not many games played, but a pretty good win rate at high levels. So we might start seeing some Kassadin back. If the game slows down enough and, you know, the average game time goes from like 27 minutes to 32 minutes or something like that, then he definitely could start coming online. So very good. You know, once you complete your Rod, you start to come online, and then once you get your Archangels, then you're really going. And especially, like, the key is get to level 16 as fast as possible and get that 2-second cooldown on your ult. That's the big time when he starts turning. So he actually ends up being pretty tanky, pretty resistant against magic damage, and does quite a bit of damage himself. Problem is he has no wave clear, so if you fall off early, or if you're constantly getting pushed in and roamed on by the Malzahar, by, you know, by the Vlad, by, you know, just anything that can push and roam, by the Aurelion Soul, like, your team could get screwed, right? And there's not a lot you can do about it because you have no wave clear. So if they push you in a tower, even though technically it's like, well, he should be able to roam, right? Because, you know, he can, he's got all these, like, ways to jump over walls and things. It's, like, true, but an integral part of roaming is being able to push the wave in first so you get priority, so you don't risk as many resources by roaming. So I think that's where his major problem is compared to some of these other champs that are like assassins that can also roam, like Talon even, is that Talon actually has pretty decent wave clear to go with it. So he can be good in the right circumstances. You have to trust, you have to be against somebody who's probably not going to push that hard, and you have to trust that your team is not going to completely fall apart while you're trying to scale up. But the survival part is something he can do now that he couldn't do in years past. He has enough sustain to survive most one-on-one matchups. It's just if people out-macro you while you're trying to power up, that could be a problem. The teleport can save you some, for sure. But, you know, you just gotta be careful. I wouldn't blind pick him most of the time, but, you know, he certainly can be good in the right circumstances. Then a couple of the honorable mentions. Let's see. We talked about Viktor. I think Xerath is one of the ones that I don't have on here who can completely take over a game in a press, but you have to hit all of his skill shots. There's almost no counterplay to this guy if the enemy team doesn't have a lot of hard engage. He does a ton of damage. He scales extremely well. He's one of the best kind of smurf booster type of champions out there. But every single ability is a skill shot, and if you miss them all, or if you miss position and get engaged on, he has very limited ways for, you know, to get away from people. So he's extremely risky, but if you do play him and play him well, then he can be very, very strong. So he could be as high as tier 1 if you're really good on him, but he's a lot riskier than a lot of the other champions out there, okay? Fizz is another assassin who's pretty good. Fizz is great at dodging skill shots. That's kind of his contribution over someone like a Talon or a Leblanc or whatever, is that he can evade a lot of stuff with his Playful Trickster. he is pretty reliant on hitting his fish to all in somebody, so you have to hit him at kind of long range these days. Like, I don't remember what the cutoff is. 900 is for the huge shark, I think, but you got to get him at least at 600 range, I believe, to get the medium shark, and you really need the medium shark to make sure that you're going to get your full rotation, your kill, especially after the nerf to ignite. So he can be good, but I think there are some situations where he could definitely fall off as well. Katarina can be super strong, especially at lower elos. The problem is a lot of kind of these top-end champions are going to have some kind of CC when we're thinking about Malzahar, thinking about, Ahri, Lissandra, Zoe. A lot of these champs will have some CC, but if their team doesn't have a lot of CC, right, if they are running something like Cassiopeia and you're confident you're going to be able to play around her miasma and her ultimate, or if it's Zoe and you can dodge her bubbles and things like that, then she can be really good. But she is a very difficult champion to play, and she is kind of like a one-trick specialist sort of champ. So if you want to put a lot of time in Cat, she can be a very good one-tricker. Game is slowing down a little bit. They have nerfed a lot of things like Scorch, like Ahri, Electrocute, Dark Harvest. All this stuff has been nerfed, which helps her out in the laning phase. Right, that's going to let her, because she really wants to get to level 6 in Gunblade. If she can get that Gunblade, then it's off to the races. But the problem is she has virtually no defense until then. You're just going to be a punching bag. Unlike someone like, Kassadin, who at least has his shield. And he can take a lot of those sustain runes. She's going to take quite a bit of sustain runes as well. But I think Kassadin has a bit more defense than she does. And he's going to get HP items, right? He's going to be building into Rod. So he's just going to have a bit more resilience. But she has more top-end damage, like burst damage, than he does, and she can kill multiple targets and completely dominate team fights. So if they don't have a lot of CC, she's great. If they do, she's questionable. So just pay attention to your team comp if you want to pick her. And then Echo is kind of like under the radar. I think he can be very strong. You don't see him a ton. He does have pretty nice wave clear. He can have really powerful stuns. If you can engage on people and they stay in your little shield circle. He is pretty good against assassins with his ultimate. So it's possible Echo could be as high as like tier 2, maybe tier 3. I just think he's a little bit less consistent. We don't see him a ton. His laning phase is not amazing. It's okay. His engage and things like that are it's just like okay. He's weird. He's good at what he does. He has really high ratios, AP ratios and things like that. So if you're good on him, he definitely can work. It's just as a melee mage, I think that he is vulnerable to a lot of stuff out there, and he doesn't have fantastic escapes either. So if he gets ganked, he's probably going to die, especially if he doesn't have his flash. So he's okay. And then Twisted Fate can be a good solo queue special. He's still got pretty good wave clear. He's got 2-second stun on his gold card, great for gank assist, great for roaming. The problem is he doesn't have a great rune, and there aren't like just super amazing items on him either. Usually you'll take something like Rod, Lichbane. You could even go Luden's Lichbane if you want to be a little bit greedier, but I think that his numbers just aren't quite there like they used to be. Just a lot of the champions that have been reworked and new champions that have come out are just a lot flashier. They have a lot more mobility, and they're just a lot more, overpowered than he is to some extent. So he can be pretty good. Being able to roam and impact those side lanes is good. It's totally possible he should sneak in at like tier 3 or something like that. There's a lot of mages that are like, kind of mid-range, not top of the top, but could easily slip into tier 3 or tier 2 if you're really good on him. And I think he's one of those champs. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and I'll see you next time.